Raging Spirits is the most intense roller coaster at the Tokyo Disney Resort. Located at Tokyo DisneySea, this ride is the layout of a compact portable coaster, but it's dressed up with some impressive temple theming. Is this enough to make it a standout ride? I will explain in this review. To start, I need to give a history of a similar roller coaster at the Disneyland Paris resort. Euro Disneyland opened in 1992. A large Indiana Jones expansion was planned, but it was scaled back to just a roller coaster due to budget cuts. This would be Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril, and it opened in 1993. This was the first Disney coaster to ever feature an inversion. Whereas most Disney coasters are custom layouts, this was a carbon copy of Pinfari's TL59 layout. This model was targeted towards carnivals and small theme parks. There were two differences though. One, this was fabricated by Intamin. Two, it was dressed up with some temple theming. While the ride looked visually appealing, it had some issues. For one, the temple was originally constructed with styrofoam blocks as a cost-cutting measure. Yes, you heard that right. Disney, a park that usually spares no expense, built a temple out of foam, so it unsurprisingly was degrading after less than a decade of operation. To remedy this, the park rebuilt it with stone during a 2014 refurbishment to improve the durability, longevity, and authenticity. 2. The ride had a very high 56-inch minimum height requirement. This is the highest height restriction we've ever seen on a Disney attraction, and was high in general for a roller coaster. This made it off limits to younger kids. 3. The ride had a low capacity. The original trains had 2 cars with 2 rows of 2, so they sat a max of 8 riders. In 2000, the ride's capacity was increased by 50% by adding a 3rd row to each car. 4. The ride was rough. It was exceedingly easy to bash your head in the directional changes. This was exacerbated from 2000 to 2004, when the coaster was modified to run backwards because you could not see what was coming. Tokyo DisneySea opened in 2001 to overwhelmingly positive reviews. Guests loved the immersive theming. The only con was the lack of attractions compared to other Disney properties. One of the most notable omissions was an adult roller coaster. This was fast-tracked by building a near clone of Indiana Jones. This would be Raging Spirits, which opened in 2005. This was a curious choice for a park that typically spares no expense. Their immersion land to land is second to none, but I think they realized they needed a coaster fast. Many Disney coasters take 2 to 3 years minimum to erect, on top of the design time. The standard, compact layout of Indiana Jones shrunk development time and accelerated construction. But the park thankfully learned some lessons from its predecessor. The coaster opened from the start with a stone temple. This has been durable and it looks fantastic. The stones are nicely detailed, complete with some animal faces, and it is accentuated by water, fire, and fog effects. It is such a photogenic ride. They also fixed the minimum height requirement. Riders only had to be 46 inches tall to experience Raging Spirits. This meant kids could experience it several years sooner. And in general, 46 inches is lower than usual for a coaster with an inversion. This also opened with the longer 3-car trains, which was absolutely necessary for DisneySea given the park's popularity. They also retained the minecart aesthetic. Raging Spirits also opened up as a somewhat rough ride. It was not as bad as Indiana Jones because there were a series of trim breaks, but it could still bash your head. However, Tokyo DisneySea performed a near full track replacement less than 1 decade after opening. This significantly improved the on-ride experience. Compare that to Indiana Jones. Due to the monetary issues at the Paris resort, the only part that was retracted in the 2014 refurbishment was the vertical loop. Raging Spirits is located towards the back of DisneySea in the Lost River Delta section of the park. This section is themed to an archaeological site in a rainforest, so this ride fits right in with the stone temple. From the midway, you can only see a few turns. The temple dominates. Most people will be focused on the ornate temple, and especially the fire effects. The best views of the ride itself occur from within the queue, although a lot of the track is obstructed by this ride's dense and messy support structure. This partially blocks the loop from view. Concerned people might miss this inversion, there is a giant sign by the entrance warning riders of a 360-degree vertical loop, and it uniquely is animated to invert whenever the actual train navigates the loop on the circuit. While the trains are short and hold just 12 people, there are several on the course at once, and per usual for Disney, this ride is quick operations. There are separate load and unload platforms. Everything rides with you, so guests can go directly to their seats. And the restraint check is swift as well, as employees ask guests to physically push up in their own harnesses, so this ends up having a solid capacity. That being said, this ride usually has an appreciable wait. It won't be one of the longest queues in the park, but it often hits the 45 to 60 minute mark. Again, this park gets slammed. What can you do to avoid the worst queues? Because of this ride's location, it usually has a much shorter queue during the first and last hour. Another big time saver is the single rider line. This is one of several rides of the resort offering this. If you are solo, or willing to split up your party, you likely will wait a fraction of the standby wait. I have never had to wait more than 15 to 20 minutes using this. You can also book a priority pass for this attraction. This is a free skip the line service available on a select few attractions. You book them through the app once you enter the park. These are very limited, and the ones for Raging Spirits typically sell out by the afternoon. I would say this is the second most popular ride in the service after Indiana Jones Adventure. It is worth noting Priority Pass is different than Premier Access. Premier Access is a paid skip the line service available on the park's newer or more popular rides. One rarity for Japan is that this ride will operate in the rain. Most coasters in Japan, and Asia for that measure, close for any sort of precipitation. At the end of the queue, riders are assigned a row. Again, unlike most parks in Japan, Disney will take row requests if you have a preference. I think the forces are pretty equal across the train, but I do have a slight preference for the front. This ride has a high reliance on visuals, so it is nice having the unobstructed view. It can be a lot harder to see in the rear rows, especially if you're shorter, due to the high seat backs. Riders are then secured by over-the-shoulder restraints. The upper part is padded, but these will rest next to the ears of riders. Fortunately, the ride tracks well enough that this is not a big issue. The trains don't have a ton of legroom though, which can become problematic if you have a bag because again, that needs to ride at your feet. Once dispatched, you round a corner. You then ascend a 53-foot or 16-meter tall lift hill. If you look to the right, you get a nice view overlooking the layout. Raging Spirits uses a dual chain lift that is relatively quiet. Compare that to Indiana Jones that uses a much louder single chain lift. Once at the top, you have a slow turn past the top of the temple. This leads to the first drop. It is short but zippy, reminiscent of the ones in old Galaxy or Zyklon coasters. On Indiana Jones, a handful of drops offer decent pops of airtime. That unfortunately was not the case with Raging Spirits. There are only 2 minor spots where you can lift out of your seat. You then rise in a turnaround 1. This wraps around a wooden archaeological structure. It is another slow turn, and to add insult to injury, there's a trim towards the end of it that saps even more speed right before the drop. I imagine you would get nice airtime without it, but as it currently rides, you only get a smidge of lift. It does have zip like the first drop at least. This leads to another turnaround underneath the first turn. No force, but plenty of head choppers. Instead of dropping off this turnaround like the prior one, it leads to an elevated straightaway that has a mid-course brake run. This will slow you down a bit. Afterwards is the ride's largest drop by far. It is a wide, swooping plunge to the left. The start of the drop is mild, but the pull-out passes through a tunnel and offers solid Gs. You then careen through a vertical loop. This has nice positive Gs towards the bottom and a little hang time at the apex. And I like how the element is enshrouded in fog. This is easily my favorite part in the ride. You then rise upwards and navigate a 540-degree downwards helix. This offers okay positive Gs and plenty of head choppers between the supports and stonework. Next, you jump upwards into a mid-course brake run. This offers a very weak pop of air in the front. but the brakes again take away some speed afterwards. This is followed by a gentle rightward turn. This doesn't do too much, it merely changes your direction. This leads to an elongated bunny hill, but is far too slow and shallow to offer any notable force. Now it is time for the grand finale, a low rightward turn. The turn itself is tame, but it's visually exciting as you pass through a fog-filled cutout in the ruins. The fog is so dense, you cannot see the other side. You then hit the brakes and return to the station, ending the 2,000-foot or 600-meter long coaster. While that's not a lot of track length, the duration feels acceptable, but that ties into the next point, the pacing. Raging Spirits does not have the best pacing. It has a lot of elevated or drawn out turns that feel slow, so they pad the duration. You only reach ground level for the vertical loop and finale, but for the latter, you've bled off a lot of speed by that point. And it also doesn't help the ride has several trims that take away even more speed, but that does help with the smoothness. On Indiana Jones, you enter some of the turns rather aggressively. This causes some laterals or sideways jolts. With over-the-shoulder restraints, this made it exceedingly easy to bash your head unless you leaned forwards. On Raging Spirits, the slower speeds, combined with that retracking, results in a smooth experience. There is barely any headbanging. You may gently tap your head in a few directional changes, but it's not bad at all. And if you lean forwards, you'll completely avoid it. This increased comfort does come at the expense of intensity though. What would I rate Raging Spirits? I would give this coaster a 5 out of 10. This is a fine coaster. While the layout is oddly off the shelf for Disney, the coaster is very nicely dressed up with the temple, fire, and fog effects. The first few drops are fun, and the vertical loop is great, but a lot of the elements, particularly those in the second half, are meh, and they lack power. Do I prefer Indiana Jones or Raging Spirits? This may be a hot take, but I slightly prefer Indiana Jones. Is it rougher? Yes, without a doubt. But I have been able to mitigate this by leaning forwards. For that reason, I will take the more intense experience of Indiana Jones. That ride is considerably better in the negative G department. But I think most people prefer the more comfortable experience of Raging Spirits. For reference, my wife thought Indiana Jones was one of the worst coasters she had ever experienced. Meanwhile, she happily rode Raging Spirits a few times while at the Tokyo resort. Those are my thoughts on Raging Spirits at Tokyo DisneySea. What are your thoughts on this coaster? Do you think it's a good fit for the park? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this review, I would appreciate it if you gave this video a like, and you consider subscribing, because there'll be a lot more roller coaster and amusement park videos here at Canopy Coaster. Thanks for watching.